The Galactic Empire in shock. Humanity's fleet arrives for annihilation. The message arrived like a whisper in the dark, a single line of text, chilling in its simplicity. We're coming. Prepare for annihilation. At first, no one took it seriously. How could they? The Galactic Empire, vast and unchallenged for millennia, had crushed every force that dared oppose it. There were rumors, of course, of an upstart human faction emerging from the depths of uncharted space. But such things were never a cause for concern. Humanity, they believed, was too primitive, too disjointed to ever pose a real threat. The Empire's forces were vast and flawless, their ships like the iron fist of the galaxy, and their weapons devastating. But that single message set off a chain of events no one could have foreseen. Inside the Empire's main communications hub, a team of analysts scrolled through countless incoming transmissions, dismissing irrelevant chatter. When the message from Earth appeared, it was flagged as an anomaly. Only it wasn't flagged for its content. It was flagged for something far worse. There were no known signatures of human encryption. This was a new form of communication, one that bypassed the Empire's usual monitoring systems. The analysts couldn't trace it back to its source. It came from deep within the unknown sectors of space. Maybe it's just a threat, one analyst said, leaning back in his chair. Someone trying to make a name for themselves. We've seen this before. But there was a glimmer of doubt in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty he couldn't quite hide. The other analysts exchanged looks, but said nothing. They had been wrong before. General Valerian Kor, the Empire's most decorated military strategist, was the one to break the silence. With his ironclad record and unparalleled achievements in combat, he commanded respect, even from the High Council. He was a man who had never known defeat. The general leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the holographic table in front of him. We'll treat it as a threat. Prepare the fleet. His command was law. Within hours, every capital ship, every strike cruiser, and every elite battalion was mobilized. But the fleet, as impressive as it was, didn't make Valerian feel the way it used to. Something about this message, bothered him. He had seen enemies rise and fall, but nothing had felt like this before. There was something almost familiar about the message. His gut told him that this wasn't just another fleeting nuisance. "I'll send a team to the coordinates," said Kor, his voice cold and calculating. "Let's see what they're really capable of." As the fleet cruised towards the uncharted sectors, Valerian stood at the helm of the flagship Imperium, the largest and most powerful warship ever built. His hands gripped the railings, his sharp eyes scanning the stars beyond the viewport. Somewhere out there, humanity was waiting. And as much as he hated to admit it, the prospect of facing them filled him with an unfamiliar unease. Hours passed. Then a transmission came in, piercing the silence like a dagger. It wasn't the usual enemy chatter. This was something different. Raw, unpolished, yet direct. "Your fleets will fall, General Kor," the voice said, its tone sharp, unforgiving. "We have no need for diplomacy. You are already too late." There was a brief silence, the kind that feels like it could last forever. Valerian's eyes narrowed. "I'll see you in battle," he said, his voice low and steady. "But know this, the Empire does not lose." With a sharp motion, he cut off the transmission, his thoughts racing. The human fleet hadn't even been detected yet, and yet they spoke with such confidence. It was as if they already knew the Empire's every move, as if they had calculated their victory before the first shot was even fired. It was absurd. "Prepare for war," Valerian barked, his voice snapping the crew into action. "We will obliterate them." And then, without warning, the first wave of human ships emerged. They weren't what he expected. The Empire's sensors had been fooled, had predicted a force much smaller and less capable. Instead, a full-scale fleet materialized from a nearby nebula, each ship designed with an unfamiliar elegance, unconventional, yet undeniably lethal. The ships weren't like the rigid, sleek lines of the Empire's war machines. No, these ships were rougher, haphazard in their design. Some looked like they had been cobbled together from old scrap ships, yet their firepower was anything but primitive. It was something altogether new, something raw, untamed. And it was heading straight for them. This is only the beginning, Valerian muttered to himself, realizing too late that the true nature of humanity's fleet had been underestimated. This wasn't a skirmish. This was a war, one the Empire wasn't prepared for. General Valerian Corps stood on the bridge of the Imperium, staring out at the fleet of human ships that had appeared like a storm from the darkness of space. His hand gripped the rail tightly, knuckles white as the faint hum of the ship reverberated through his bones. There was no going back now. The Empire's pride had been challenged, and its dominance was at stake. The human fleet, vast and unyielding, had arrived without warning, an unstoppable force. It was unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. Each ship seemed to have been crafted by the hands of desperate innovators, rough and brutal in design, but capable of terrifying precision. The Imperium was used to encountering foreign species and their technological wonders, but this was something else entirely. "We've detected movement, General," the sensor officer reported. His voice trembled as he glanced nervously at the oncoming human ships. "They're charging weapons." Valerian's eyes narrowed. "Prepare to engage," he ordered. "All weapons, maximum power." The hum of the ship's engines shifted, the vibration running through the floor as the Imperium and its fleet of cruisers powered up, readying for combat. The enemy ships didn't flinch, didn't alter their trajectory. They just moved forward, calm and unrelenting. On his command, the Empire's ships fired first. Brilliant beams of energy erupted from the cannons, tearing through space like blinding flashes of lightning. But the human ships, they dodged. They swerved and juked in ways the Empire's military experts hadn't anticipated, their movements wild and unpredictable, as if their crews had been trained for nothing but combat at every turn. "Fire again," Valerian shouted, his pulse quickening. The Empire's weapons charged once more, and another barrage of fire rained down on the human fleet. But it wasn't enough. The energy beams grazed the human ships, leaving nothing but charred hulls in their wake. The humans retaliated swiftly, cannon fire lashing out from their ships with deadly accuracy. Valerian's eyes widened as the first cruiser in the Empire's fleet was hit, its shields flickering and then disintegrating under the force of the blast. "Shields are failing," a voice yelled from the comms panel. "Hull integrity compromised." The Imperium lurched, the impact shaking the entire ship. A wave of panic rippled through the crew. They had never encountered such resistance before, never faced an enemy capable of taking the fight to them so quickly. The human fleet wasn't just surviving the Empire's fire, they were thriving in it. Valerian gritted his teeth, refusing to let the fear seep into his voice. "All units, fall back to defensive formation," he barked. "We'll regroup and—" Before he could finish his order, the Imperium was hit again. The ship's immense shields flickered, nearly failing, as if the energy beams were drawing strength from the very fabric of space itself. The human fleet's weaponry wasn't just powerful, it was calculated, devastating. Each hit seemed to be aimed at the ship's critical systems, not just random spots on the hull. These humans had tactics. They were prepared for this war. "I want every available ship engaging those targets," Valerian ordered, his voice hoarse, but still authoritative. The battlefield was shifting before him, and there was no time for hesitation. The Empire's fleet was supposed to be the galaxy's most advanced and fearsome. And yet, here it was, being torn apart by a race once dismissed as weak and insignificant. Across the bridge, an officer called out, "Enemy fleet is maneuvering for another attack pattern, General. They're surrounding us." Valerian's eyes flashed with realization. The human ships weren't just engaging in battle. They were herding the Empire's fleet into a killing zone. Every movement was calculated. They were taking control of the engagement, not reacting, but dictating the terms of battle. His mind raced. These humans were no amateurs. They had mastered the art of war in ways the Empire had failed to comprehend. A sudden explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered, and alarms blared as a section of the Imperium's outer hull ruptured under the relentless assault. Valerian gritted his teeth, refusing to show weakness. but his thoughts churned with disbelief. This was supposed to be the moment where they showed their dominance, crushed this human threat under the weight of their might. But here they were, faltering, struggling to hold the line. "Reinforcements are on the way," an officer reported, his voice tinged with desperation. "But, General, the damage." "I know," Valerian interrupted, his voice low but firm. The damage to the fleet was severe, but there was still hope. The Empire wasn't defeated yet. He would not let it fall to these upstarts. "Signal the fleet." "We're pulling back," he commanded. "Regroup and reinforce. They'll soon realize this isn't a battle they can win." But as he spoke, he knew. The humans weren't retreating. They weren't running from this fight. No, they were just getting started. Out of the corner of his eye, Valerian saw the human flagship cutting through the chaos. A behemoth of a ship bristling with weaponry, moving with an eerie, deliberate purpose. His heart skipped a beat. The first skirmish was over, and humanity had won. General Valerian Corps stood at the helm of the Imperium, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The images on the main view screen were etched in his mind. The human fleet, now clearly in control, had wiped through the outer defenses of the Empire's border worlds with horrifying efficiency. The aftermath was undeniable. The once indomitable Empire had been pierced, its walls breached. It wasn't just the strength of the human ships. It was their unpredictability. Their fleet wasn't built like the Empire's, with polished designs and uniformity. No, the human ships were a chaotic patchwork of scavenged technology, makeshift weapons, and an unmistakable drive for destruction. The Empire's commanders had underestimated humanity, believing that their lack of experience in deep space warfare would be their downfall. How wrong they were. "We've detected multiple unknown ships emerging from the planet's orbit," the sensor officer reported, his voice trembling. "They're unlike anything we've seen before." Valerian's gaze hardened. He had to act, now. His orders were clear. Stop the human advance at all costs, regroup, and mount a counteroffensive. But every move he made seemed to be anticipated, every tactic countered, before he could even deploy it. "Prepare for full engagement. All ships converge on the human fleet," Valerian commanded, his voice a low growl. His hands moved quickly, inputting commands to initiate the battle plans. This time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. He couldn't afford another failure. The Imperium-S cannons roared to life, unleashing waves of energy at the advancing human ships. The first salvo erupted into a burst of light, but the humans didn't flinch. They danced through the barrage, moving with an uncanny grace that only added to the terror of their presence. For every shot that struck a human ship, another one vanished behind the veil of their defensive systems. It was almost as if they were one step ahead, anticipating the Empire's every move. "Target their engines," Valerian ordered. "Disrupt their mobility." The Empire's fleet adjusted their weapons, but the humans were already repositioning. A human destroyer appeared out of nowhere, flanking the Imperium-S right side. In seconds, its weapons locked onto the flagship, firing beams so concentrated they melted through the Imperium-S shields, the first layers crumbling like paper under a knife. The attack was precise, surgical, and devastating. "Shields are failing. Hull integrity at 60%, an officer yelled from the communications panel. Valerian's mind raced, but the chaos of the battle left him no time to think. He gritted his teeth and slammed his fist on the control panel. "Focus all fire on that destroyer. Now." The Empire's cannons fired in unison, a barrage of energy blasts hurtling toward the human ship. But it wasn't enough. The human destroyer had already activated its maneuvering thrusters, dodging and weaving with a level of skill that the Empire's fleet couldn't match. It wasn't just faster, it was smarter. The human tactics were becoming clear. They didn't fight by the same rules as the Empire. They adapted, they learned, and they hit where it hurt the most. As the battle raged on, the Imperium was slowly being encircled, the Empire's once dominant position crumbling. The human ships surrounded them, like a swarm of hornets closing in on a predator. Every move the Empire made was countered with ruthless efficiency. "They're flanking us on all sides, General," another officer said, fear creeping into his voice. "We can't break through. They're ships. They're everywhere." Valerian's jaw tightened. The fear that had started to grow in his chest now bloomed into something sharper, something more dangerous. He was no longer fighting just for victory. He was fighting for survival. This was no longer a battle of pride. It was a battle for the very soul of the Empire. "Fall back to the last defensive position," Valerian ordered, his voice edged with steel. "We must regroup or risk total annihilation." But even as the retreat order was issued, Valerian knew deep down that it was too late. The Empire had underestimated humanity's resolve, their ability to fight, and most terrifying of all, their willingness to adapt. A human ship emerged from the shadows, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed anything the Empire had. Its weaponry crackled with energy, and Valerian could almost feel the heat radiating off it through the view screen. "We need more time," Valerian muttered under his breath. But there's no time left. Before he could issue another command, the human flagship fired its weapons, the sheer force of the blast ripping through the heart of the Empire's fleet, leaving only chaos in its wake. Humanity had not just arrived. They had arrived to conquer. General Valerian Corps stood on the bridge of the Imperium, his fingers digging into the cold metal of the command rail. The Empire's flagship was battered, its once pristine hull scarred from a series of devastating human attacks. Around him, the remains of the once proud Imperial fleet drifted like broken toys, their final battle a grim reminder of the catastrophic shift in power. The human fleet had breached every line of defense, and now, with ruthless precision, they were closing in on the Empire's capital system, the very heart of the Empire itself. The once untouchable core where the Imperial Council resided was now vulnerable to annihilation. "We've lost communication with the outer colonies," an officer reported, his voice strained with the weight of their losses. "The human ships are everywhere. They've cut us off from reinforcements." Valerian's lips tightened. His mind was racing, searching for a strategy, any hope of turning the tide. But the humans were relentless. They didn't follow the rules of war. They didn't seek glory or honor. They only sought to win, and they did so with terrifying efficiency. "Prepare for a direct assault on the capital," Valerian ordered. His voice, though steady, carried an edge of desperation. "All remaining fleet units, engage the human fleet. Hold them back long enough for us to secure the capital." He had no illusions. This was no longer a fight to win. It was a fight for survival. The Empire's pride was gone, and the human advance was inevitable. Yet, he still had one card to play. The Emperor's personal guard was waiting. Their training, their skill, it was the last bastion of defense. If anyone could stop this madness, it would be them. Across the system, the human flagship, an imposing behemoth, moved forward, slicing through space with terrifying purpose. Its weapons were already primed, its shields unscathed. As it drew closer to the capital, the rest of the human fleet fell into formation, surrounding the Empire's remaining forces with a calculated ruthlessness. "We won't survive this," one of the officers whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the Imperium's failing systems. Valerian didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the screen, where the human flagship now loomed large. He was waiting for a sign, something that might offer a shred of hope. And then it came. "General," a voice called from across the bridge. "They're hailing us." A direct communication from the human flagship. Valerian's chest tightened. He could feel the weight of the moment, the finality of it. He hadn't expected a message, not now. But the humans were giving him a choice, and somehow, he knew it would be one that changed everything. "Put it through," he ordered, his voice low. The screen flickered, and there, in stark contrast to the darkness of the battlefield, appeared a human officer. She stood tall, her uniform simple but imposing, her face calm as if she were discussing a trivial matter. "This is Admiral Sylvia Hawke," the human officer said. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "General Corps, I offer you one last chance. Surrender the capital. Disband your fleet and your empire. Allow us to take control without further bloodshed." The words hung in the air, cold and final. The entire bridge fell silent. Valerian's mind whirled. The offer was simple: surrender or face complete annihilation. Humanity was offering mercy, but it wasn't out of kindness. It was a calculated move. If they could take the capital without firing another shot, it would be a greater victory than any battle. He knew what he had to do. If you think you can take the capital so easily, you are gravely mistaken, Valerian finally spoke, his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. The Empire will never surrender to the likes of you. Admiral Hawke's face remained impassive, but there was a glint in her eyes. Very well, General. Your choice will be your last. With a cold smile, she cut the communication. Valerian felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. This wasn't just a loss of battle. It was the fall of an entire empire. His thoughts shifted to the Emperor. If they failed to hold the capital, all would be lost. All units prepare for final defense, Valerian commanded, his voice growing sharper. We will die standing, not kneeling. The final clash was about to unfold, but in the back of his mind, Valerian knew the truth. The Empire's fall was no longer a matter of if, it was a matter of when. The heart of the Empire was about to be torn apart, and humanity would be the one to do it. General Valerian Corps stood in the war room of the Imperium, the once proud flagship of the Empire, now a shadow of its former self. The grand capital, the heart of the Empire, loomed outside the viewport, a dying jewel that had once ruled the galaxy. The human fleet had encircled it, their weapons trained, their ships waiting like vultures over a carcass. In the corridors of the capital city, Emperor Tiberius, the last symbol of the Empire's unyielding power, prepared for what seemed inevitable. The vast defenses surrounding the capital were crumbling, one by one, under humanity's relentless assault. It was clear now, the Empire had no chance of winning. Only one choice remained: to die with honor or surrender and ensure the survival of whatever remained of the Empire. Valerian clenched his fists, watching the stars beyond the Imperium as his mind raced. The communications from the human fleet had been clear. They had no interest in negotiation anymore. They had come to finish the Empire, and nothing would stop them. General, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was his first officer. The capital shields are almost gone. The human fleet is advancing toward the Emperor's palace. Valerian's stomach tightened. The Emperor had made it clear that he would not flee, that the pride of the Empire would remain unbroken until the end. It was his final command: fight to the death. Prepare the fleet, Valerian said, his voice steady. We give them no quarter. This will be their final mistake. He turned to the tactical officers. We are not retreating. If we die today, we die fighting. We give the Emperor one last chance to escape. Full firepower, all cannons, all forces, defend the capital. The command was given, and what remained of the Imperial fleet moved into position. They would make their last stand here in the shadow of the capital, against the inevitable tide of humanity's might. Outside the command center, the roar of battle intensified as the human fleet closed in. Ships larger than any Valerian had seen before began to position themselves around the capital, their weapons charged, their intent clear. In the distance, the enormous human flagship loomed, a death sentence in its wake. On the surface of the planet, the Emperor stood tall in his throne room, a symbol of the Empire's past glory. He gazed out at the viewscreen, watching as the city's last line of defense crumbled. Is it time? A voice asked from behind him. It was his most trusted general, the man who had stood by his side throughout the centuries of war. The Emperor sighed deeply. It is, my old friend. It is time. Let them come. Let them take everything. If they wish to destroy us, they must do so with their own hands. The moment was silent, heavy with finality. The Empire had built its legacy on dominance, but now it was facing the inevitable. The human fleet wasn't just an enemy. It was a force of nature, unyielding and unstoppable. Back aboard the Imperium, Valerian's eyes remained fixed on the human flagship, now within striking distance. He knew there was no way to win. The odds were impossible, but his duty remained. He had to buy the Emperor time to make the final call. Lock weapons on the flagship. All cannons fire on my mark, Valerian commanded. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice never wavered. The fleet gathered its strength for one final push. The Empire's weapons fired in unison, a bright streak of energy shooting toward the human flagship. For a moment, Valerian allowed himself to believe, just for a moment, that they could still turn the tide, that they could still win this final battle. But the human flagship's shields flared, absorbing the blasts, as if they were nothing. The return fire came swiftly, overwhelming the Imperium in seconds. Valerian's last hope shattered as explosions rocked the ship, the command center thrown into chaos. Damage report. Valerian barked. We've lost forward shields. Hull integrity at 40%. All systems failing, the officer replied, panic in his voice. The Imperium was sinking. There was no time left. Valerian turned his gaze to the view screen once more. The Emperor's palace was now fully exposed, with only a handful of defenders left to stand against the oncoming storm. Humanity's victory was assured. General, we can't hold out much longer, the officer said, his voice barely above a whisper. Valerian's lips pressed into a thin line. It was over. The Empire was done. And as much as he hated to admit it, the humans had proven something undeniable. They were not just a new power in the galaxy. They were the future. The Emperor's final stand would be the last great battle the Empire ever fought. The final blow was coming. It was no longer a question of who would win. It was a question of how long the Empire could hold on before it was swallowed whole. General Valerian Corps stood on the bridge of the Imperium, now a wreck of twisted metal and broken technology. The battle for the capital had ended, and the Empire, for all its glory, had been wiped from the galaxy. Humanity stood victorious, but the cost of that victory was just beginning to reveal itself. The view outside the viewport showed the shattered remains of the capital planet, its once great cities, now reduced to rubble. The human ships hovered over the ruined world, silent sentinels of a galaxy-changing moment. The Imperium's final stand had bought humanity time, but it had also exposed a deeper truth. The Empire was no more, but in its place was a power vacuum, one that would be filled quickly by those who had waited in the shadows for years. Valerian knew this all too well. It wasn't just the human fleet they had to worry about. The galaxy was about to enter a new era, and with it came dangers that had never been seen before. Admiral Sylvia Hawke, commander of the human flagship, entered the bridge with a quiet authority. Her face was stoic, but there was no mistaking the weight she carried. The end of the Empire had been swift, but it had left behind a galaxy ripe for the taking, and a galaxy that would soon begin to splinter as the balance of power shifted. General Corps, she said, her voice calm but firm. We've won, but we've also inherited something far more dangerous than we anticipated. The Empire's enemies are already moving. We've received word from the outer colonies. Rebels are rallying, and there are signs of unknown forces gathering beyond the Empire's borders. Valerian's gaze hardened. You knew this would happen, he said, his tone flat. The Empire may have fallen, but the galaxy is anything but stable. Its factions are already regrouping. I've seen the signs. Hawke nodded slowly. We've prepared for that. But it's worse than we thought. The unknown fleet we've heard rumors of, they've just entered our sector. They're massive, much larger than anything we've ever seen. Valerian's chest tightened. The Empire's defeat was one thing, but now they were facing a threat that made the Empire's military seem small in comparison. I warned you, he muttered, staring out at the fleet. We've beaten the Empire, but we've just opened the gates for something worse. Hawke's expression darkened. I know, but now we face a choice. We can consolidate our power and prepare for what's coming, or we can risk everything to move against this new threat before it's too late. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. The human fleet had the strength to crush the remnants of the Empire, but they were nowhere near prepared for what lay beyond the galaxy's edge. For the first time since the victory, Valerian felt the chill of true fear. We need to act quickly, Valerian said, his voice suddenly sharp with clarity. I don't care what we've done or who we've defeated. The real battle is just beginning, and I fear that if we don't move fast, we'll lose everything." Hawk stepped forward, locking eyes with him. "Then let's get to work. We've already proven we can conquer. Now we'll prove we can hold on to what we've earned." The command was given, and the human fleet shifted its focus. The battle to control the remnants of the Empire's power was over. The true fight, against whatever lay beyond, had only just begun. As the Imperium drifted silently in the wake of its final battle, Valerian felt the weight of what had happened. The galaxy had changed in ways he couldn't even begin to comprehend. And as much as humanity had won, they had also made themselves a target. The price of their victory wasn't measured in lives lost or ships destroyed. It was in the uncertainty of what was to come. The Empire had fallen. But the galaxy? The galaxy was only beginning to unravel.